ChatGPT and generative AI are some of the most disruptive technologies over the last few years. As an end user, this is all exciting stuff, but how do companies view this technology? From an enterprise level, what are real business use cases and what are the risks? How are companies handling this and what are they doing to adjust? Enterprises are doing everything they can to get in front of this technology. This is a tough spot for them to be in. Companies are being forced more than any other time to adopt new and untested technology. The landscape in technology is entirely different with everything being cloud-based and interconnected. For example, how many companies are using Microsoft O365, the cloud-based version of Microsoft Office? Well, Microsoft owns OpenAI, who created ChatGPT. What happens when ChatGPT finds its way into Microsoft's Office products? Don't forget that ChatGPT has already made its way into Bing, Microsoft's search engine. Companies are scrambling. As a part of upper management myself, I've been in conversation with CISOs, architects, and third-party advisory companies to gauge where we are as a company as compared to other companies. What are other companies focusing on? What should we be concerned about? We're starting to see clear patterns for use cases and risks. As we get accustomed to generative AI and ChatGPT, we see how it eases certain functions, certain repetitive tasks. This pseudo-assistant can make us more efficient and more effective. But what are the risks? Hallucination. Yes. This is a real issue with AI. The very nature of AI is to provide answers. The last thing AI is programmed to do is respond with, I don't know. So sometimes it may just come up with an answer. So let's say, for example, you ask ChatGPT, when was the United States established? Of course, we know it as July 4th, 1776, or 7/4/1776. But in many parts of the world, people use the day, month, year format instead of the month, day, year format. So depending on which models and which data was used, ChatGPT could respond with 4/7/1776, which is a plausible answer. But for us, that translates to April 7th, 1776, which is clearly a wrong answer. ChatGPT must be hallucinating. This leads to another risk, the black box risk. How do we know where AI is getting the information from? You saw what happened in the previous example. How do we know that the data is good? Projects are already underway working to solve this problem by adding sources and references to the answers given. This solution has been dubbed explainability. The goal of these explainability toolkits is to provide context and references to the answers returned by AI. If we consider the July 4th example, you'd be far more happy if the answer indicated that it got its data from the Library of Congress as opposed to some subreddit or forum somewhere. Something else to consider is copyright issues. And we all know how AI works. It uses publicly available data to make its decisions or determinations. How do we know that it isn't returning copyrighted information? Let's say, for example, I write a blog about my travels to Europe. AI scrapes the internet for data, but it does so without asking permission. What if those AI models are trained using my information? Someone could ask a question like, where should I go in Europe? And the AI engine could return my words without me ever providing any sort of consent. I wouldn't receive any compensation or recognition from the use of my words, while the AI tool would presumably make money from my words. So if we consider that example in terms of coding, instead of copyright issues, this could lead to licensing issues. We wouldn't want to use code that isn't properly licensed. Companies are looking into ways to combat this situation by using permissioned data sources. This is a burgeoning technology, and as with any new tech, there's going to be some growing pains. These are just some of the named risks that we're already paying attention to. There are companies already working to resolve these issues, and assuming that we can get past these risks, what are some actual business use cases for generative AI? There's a variety of use cases in the software engineering domain. There are possibilities in code generation. There are possibilities beyond code generation. For example, these models can do analysis of code, which means that, particularly for legacy apps, they can look at the code and tell you what the application is doing or what the code is doing. It can help with code search. For example, it can be a replacement for things like Stack Overflow. It can also help with documentation, where the models can look at the code and create the documentation for it based on that code. Outside of software engineering, there are use cases in the natural language domain. text generation, Q&A, and summarization. For example, let's say you have a lengthy customer document, something like a 20-page PDF. The models can crawl through the documents to summarize that into short sentences or topics that an analyst can now use when they're having a conversation with a customer. There are use cases around language translation. For example, in today's remote environment, how many conversations are done virtually? If you're using Microsoft Teams, for example, well, Microsoft is bringing Gen AI into Teams to allow for real-time translation, which means that if you're speaking to people around the world, everyone will be able to speak in their native languages while Gen AI handles the translation. Within financial services, there are a variety of use cases for modeling pattern recognition and trend analysis. Some of these services, especially in the software engineering domain, are already in either beta or live for public use. Services such as GitHub's Copilot and AWS Code Whisperer are able to assist with code development and code generation. This is an exciting time, and companies are already asking the right questions. How do we bring this into our organization while being safe? How do we know that the data is good? There are already patterns developing around how enterprise organizations can implement these AI tools. These all focus around the data and how to train AI models. The first approach is called augmented generation. The very nature of AI is to train the models using as much data as possible. That means using the data that's publicly available on the internet. But in augmented generation, the models would first use privately available data within an organization and then use publicly available data to augment the answer. This means that the private data will be the primary source, which is then augmented by public data. Another approach is to fine-tune the models. This gives enterprises the ability to customize what data they want and what data they don't want used to train the models. For example, maybe you don't want to train the models using social media as a data source. Finally, companies can use private-only data to train the AI models. And while this allows companies to ensure that everything remains in-house or private, the trade-off is that it's difficult and expensive to adequately train those AI models. Right now, these are the most common patterns for companies looking to integrate AI, augmented generation, model fine-tuning, and private-only modeling. I've discussed some of these risks previously, and I'm surprised and pleased to see how quickly enterprises have responded. Enterprise organizations aren't known to be the fastest movers in the space. Check out this video to see my concerns over ChatGPT and AI.